I know. You're constantly making choices about your food, what you eat, what you avoid, where you get it, and how you factor in all the noise about what's right. But I think you're missing something really critical about how the food on your plate is deeply connected to everything you care about: your health, the community, the environment, and the economy. I'm Dana DePrima, founder of the Four Farmers Movement and host of the One Bite is Everything podcast, now proudly a part of Heritage Radio Network. Here we are reconnecting the dots, revealing the hidden forces behind our food system and why it matters more than ever. Each week, we uncover the real impact of what's on your plate, who controls it, what's at stake, and what you can do about it. Because food is more than just what you eat. It's quite literally connected to everything you care about. New episodes drop every Thursday. Subscribe to One Bite is Everything and take your seat at the table.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is a podcast about food and culture centered in Black and Indigenous foodways, hosted by myself, Zella Palmer, right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Each episode features high vibrational conversations with cultural bearers, chefs, farmers, scholars, barbecue pit masters, and more. Where there is flavor, there is history. Join me on Culture and Flavor and all of my guests as we share stories that will have you praise dancing, cooking, conjuring, and inspiring your culinary journey. Welcome to another episode of Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. On today's episode, we are going to sit down and talk with one of our most esteemed elders, Dr. Aris Latham, Panamanian-born, internationally recognized as the father of gourmet ethical raw foods. In 1979, Dr. Latham founded Sunfired Foods in Harlem, New York. For many of us who have followed his work or attended one of his retreats, we not only leave lighter and empowered, but we learn at the feet of one of our most honored elders. Now, when I think about my own journey with food, and particularly as a grandchild of the Great Migration, and what my life was like living in a concrete jungle on the south side of Chicago, I remember the watermelon man or the farmers from Mississippi who would bring truckloads of farm-raised foods in the summer months on Stony Island. And I remember those big mamas who would feed the entire neighborhood at church outings or just from their home and block club parties. So much that I remember about growing up. And I still remember my grandmother and other elderly Black women protesting the closing of our only grocery store on 79th Street in Chicago. But then it was replaced with fast food, corner stores with bulletproof windows. And all I can remember is the times that those who resisted these structural changes, like the Nation, who were selling bean pies on street corners or in intersections, or the Rastas, who set up card tables outside of any park event or in summer months by the beach to tell us about Aito food. It reminded me of how integral and how we have always tried to find food and be closer to the land, no matter what our circumstances are. So this conversation that we're about to have with Dr. Latham, I am so humbled. I'm so honored to have this highly vibrational conversation and to celebrate his legacy. And I need you all to sit and listen intentionally on what he has to say. So welcome, Dr. Latham. Welcome to Culture and Flavor.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. I am so happy to be here at this moment, sharing with you and our family my flavor.
Come on now. So let's start from the beginning. So the late comedian Dick Gregory was a giant. And on your website, you shared a quote from him. If God was to come back to this planet, I would look for Sunfired Foods because this food is exactly what godliness is about. I would like you to explain to our audience what Sunfire Food is and what you learned from the late Dick Gregory.
Oh, wow. Well, I tell you, my first exposure to Dick Gregory was when I moved from Panama, from the rainforest, from the bush of the U.S. Panama Canal Zone, where my grandparents, as I was, second generation migrant workers, descendants, my grandparents who came from Jamaica and Barbados to build the Panama Canal. So leaving Panama at the age of 17, leaving the bush and landing in Bed-Stuy, inner city USA, it was quite a culture flip. It wasn't a shock. It was a flip. So it didn't take me much to adjust and adapt. And part of that entire process was going to school. So I landed, 17. I had dropped out of school in Panama at the age of 13 when I first went to secondary school, the seventh grade. In 2 months, I was suspended for, being who I am. And so being away from school for 3 days and not letting my parents know, or my grandparents, who were my guardians at the time, me and my buddy, my desk mate, an indigenous brother, we decided to not let our people know that we were suspended from school, and we're going to come dressed up for school. But once we get to school, we're gonna redress and put on our bush clothes, and we took it to the bush. So we went, walked like about 5 miles deep into the bush from the schoolyard. And we went to harvest mangoes. Mangoes were in season. So we said, instead of going into the classroom, we'll just stand outside of the school and we'll sell mangoes. Since we don't have anything else to do, we'll just school on the corner. So that actually, in 3 days, we were so successful that we decided that we don't need to go back in school, go back in the classroom, because the purpose of the classroom was for us to eventually get a job. So we created a job for ourselves. So anyway, I say say all of this to say, landing in there, I went to Bushwick High School right there at the edge of Bed-Stuy. And in my English class, we were assigned, literature to read stuff, and we were supposed to, I guess, summarize it or whatever, give our take on it. And the book that I read, really my first book in school, was Up From Nigger.
Mm,
Up From Nigger, a book by Dick Gregory.
mm,
And so I landed right, we're talking 1964. So I landed in the U.S. in the heat of our life, you know, mid 60s, really high energy. And here is this joker, of a brother, big guy, few 100 pounds, talking about, how it was tight growing up at home, with all of his siblings. And, you have to guard your plate. How you sit and your plate, your arm is outside of the parameter, keeping,
mhm,
it's like nobody crossed the line here, because everything was tight. They had to share so little. So, but then, here he is now, stand-up comedian, doing the night scene, the clubs in Chicago and all over the place. So now he's like, up from nigger. Now I get to eat high on the hog, this kind of stuff. So that immediate reference to food, and here I am coming out of, being a dropout for like, we're talking uh, 3 years of dropout from high school from secondary school. And, when it got into the food business, to defend my life, and then I'm introduced to this person here, Dick Gregory, reading his literature. And it was funny. So what did I learn from Dick Gregory? Keep it light. The humor. you know, let's sit back and laugh at ourselves. Look at the predicament that we're in today. We are sick. And most of us are sick and tired of being sick. And we got to laugh at ourselves. How did we get here? That's what I learned from Dick Gregory. So let's laugh it off. Let's crack a joke. But under that joke, be careful because you might be spooked, because I've read The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So I got deep into the African-American culture immediately, being in the hood. And of course, with that came, besides what I'm eating in the school, like I'm being introduced now to sloppy Joe and hot dog and hamburger and all this stuff after eating nothing but fresh bush food, mangoes and oranges and this stuff. This was our snack thing, this was our go-to food, fresh food that's just in abundance, carpet in our bush, and here I am, this diet switch and eating what, has come to known as the SAD diet, the standard American diet. And of course, being in the hood, I couldn't pass up, what I call shitlings, and all the other great, cornbread and collard greens and sweet potato and all of this kind of stuff. So I've been immersed, and thanks to Dick Gregory, I can now even still now look back and laugh and share my science, my wisdom, and make sure that you can enjoy it and that you can laugh and that you could feel, the easing of the pain that comes with all that we have been basically, our food has been weaponized. That's the bottom line. And we got to laugh at this situation here. But, ultimately, I am a food revolutionary, and this is who I am today still. And the revolution is being televised.
So reflecting back, as a young man, consuming food that was, rooted in so much history in the U.S. And, our experience as African Americans and what we had available to us, the environment that, we lived in. Looking back on that now that you're 76 years old, what are your thoughts about just the food that was available to us?
Well, yeah, I'm now 77. I'll be 78.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. Well, no, this from last year. I'll be 78, July 24th.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yes.
happy pre-birthday.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So really looking back over the years, basically the anthem in my neighborhood in the 60s was like, there was a book, a little booklet, self-published booklet by one sister out of Washington, D.C., Lena Mobley. I remember this book. It was just, a grapevine book, the self-published, stapled together, and it was like, food is a weapon. Yeah, so this is where my consciousness started waking up. Like, man, look at these apples, look at these apples, the apples that I'm getting in Bed-Stuy at the corner store. And look at the apples. Now I'm going to school out in Bayside, New York, in the suburbs, a couple of hours from home, buses and trains to get me out there. And look at these apples out here in the suburbs. Man, our apples don't look like this. I've been weaponized, huh? Yeah. So so looking back, and seeing all of what's going on, basically it's been going on. Now the pressure cooker is even more intense now because we're talking nanoparticles, and then you got people who are trying to be like me that are calling themselves what they call themselves plant-based. Plant-based. If what you're eating, the base is made of plant, what's been layered on top of the plant? Is it been spiked with nanoparticles? chemicals? What's on the base? Fake meat? So anyway, let's come on home.
Mm,
And the food has been weaponized. We are sick. Humanity is sicker now than ever before
mm,
in our history, and it's getting worse. And it seems like there's no stopping in sight, because there is a whole army of medical institutions, doctors and hospitals and universities, and they keep turning out more and more every day, and we're getting sicker and sicker.
mm,
Something is not right with this picture.
mm,
So, so I have, been able to observe now for the past 60 years what the deal is, being in the belly, being up front and close, and then going through the whole food system, from migrant, to wisdom seeker, you know,
mm, mm,
and
mhm,
a one who shares the wisdom of food. Like, wake up, family.
mm.
It's time. Let's take ownership and responsibility.
I always think about, the power of the Caribbean, and just thinking about Caribbean migrants, like you said, as you experienced, as moving to Harlem in the '60s. I Especially in major cities, not so much in the South, because they still had access to land and, fresh vegetables, and many were farmers. But those who migrated during the Great Migration, and just the flip, as you said, where they were once sharecroppers, and now they have to move into these tenant, buildings where, a family of 13 has to live in a one bedroom,
Mm, mm,
and as Caribbean migrants came to cities like Harlem, obviously Marcus Garvey, was
mm,
pivotal in that history. But as they continue to come, that consciousness that something is wrong with our food system, something is wrong with Western medicine, and then setting up tables, on 125th to sell bitters, you know, also helped in many ways African American communities, in my opinion, that were depleted, and it couldn't find a real apple, and were suffering from the sugars, i.e.,
mhm,
diabetes,
mhm,
and then even, fast forward, I remember my mom saying, my parents' generation never had cancer, and so I would like you to talk about the power of the Caribbean and the power of consciousness when you grow up in an environment where mangoes are falling from
mm,
trees.
mm. Yeah, well, just to really add to what you have mentioned about this power, and mentioning Marcus Garvey. Everywhere that Marcus Garvey went, he set up a bakery. A bakery. All of the places where he set up a Liberty Hall, a meeting place where we would come together and, speak about our agenda. He made sure that we had bread. We had the staple, and we made it ourselves. So, but growing up in the Caribbean, especially in Panama. See, Panama, my grandparents came to Panama in 1904 at the beginning of the building of the Panama Canal. And it's so interesting, the whole politics and, culture of that adventure of the US pretty much commandeering, a slice of Colombia, turn it into Panama by helping it get its independence, where they're dealing with certain business people. And they bring in these migrant workers to build this canal, the labor force. And my grandfather from Barbados was one of 60,000, you know, uh, migrants that came in to Panama looking for jobs. And only 15,000 of them got jobs. So the other 45,000 all settled in a place called Colon on the Caribbean coast. This was where we landed. This was the entry point. Like the Statue of Liberty, basically in the U.S. So this was the entry point, and it became actually at the time the capital of the Caribbean. Colon became the capital of the whole Caribbean basin. People came from every single island, and not only the islands, but the mainland, from Belize, from Suriname, from Brazil, Ecuador, Argentina, all these countries that are right up against the Caribbean basin, they all came to Panama looking for jobs, but mostly we're talking African descent from English speaking countries, because it's the Americans and they're looking for English speaking workers. So, with my grandparents coming here, my grandfather working on the canal, and we're talking the U.S. took the credit for building the canal, but they were the engineers, they were the guys in the safety suits and things like that. But the hands in the ground, picks and shovel, you know, tearing down a big mountain, carrying the grenade in their hands to place it so that the mountain could be blown apart, and many of them getting blown apart with the mountain because the dynamite, exploded prior to they dropping it. These kinds of things. So being a descendant of the diggers, the people who built the canal with picks and shovel, and living in the U.S. Panama Canal zone, in basically the work quarters, which ultimately, once I moved to New York, I realized these were the projects that we were actually living in. But we thought we had privilege because we are on the U.S. Panama Canal zone, and we could go to the commissary and buy carnation milk and Domino sugar. But on the other side of the divide, that divides Panama from the U.S. Panama Canal zone, where all of our people settled, which we are still there today in the city of Colon, and go into the marketplace every Saturday. And it's like what you have just mentioned about marketplaces in your environment during those times, being a grandchild of these migrants that move from one part of the U.S. to the other. Here we are in this environment where there's people from Curacao, Dominica, Haiti, you name it, and we all together for the first time, living this African culture, all the colors, all of the different foods, everything. We all brought foods from our home places, seeds, and ackee from Jamaica is planted all over Panama, even up to today. I just got a nice portion of it from my trees. So anyway, this kind of food and culture and convergence of pretty much the diaspora into one place, like we did in Harlem, and me landing in Harlem now in 1979. And this was not like my first time around in Harlem, because I already, you know, being growing up in Brooklyn when I first got to the U.S. Yes, I spent many a days in Harlem. I went to the mosque, Nation of Islam, trying to see what was going on over there, and all of these other things. Going to the big festivals, and coming on the coattail, of the big Harlem Renaissance and everything that was going on with literature, the Schomburg, and all of these places. That Harlem was definitely, a place in my mind, in my soul. So when I moved to Harlem in 1979, there's so much I want to share. So I'm bringing, eras and times and bringing them together and, in different ways so you could see the depth of what has made me who I am in terms of an innovator, that put me in a position where I actually invented an entire cuisine, an entire cuisine with the flavor that I call Kush, the black flavor, So using foods from all over the world in New York now, once I'm finished, high school, I'm in college, and I'm going into the suburbs and meeting up with the hippies and the Black Power movement and the Vietnam War movement, the white radical student movements, all of this thing. So I am in this convergence of consciousness. So food has become like my revolution at this point. So we're talking now, we're talking 1967, college campus USA, you know, the raising of the Black Power fist, in Mexico, all of these things. And now here I am fully accepting the fact that the food in my neighborhood were weaponized. And then looking around the rest of New York, going to the Greenwich Village and these places and seeing how the hippies brought in the organic foods from California, from, from Florida, and now becoming conscious of what I eat and becoming a vegetarian in 1970, this was a major move for me because, it was not only based on even just the things that I read from exploring the whole concept of vegetarianism based on mainstream, interpretation of vegetarianism, but also what I learned in our community, in our neighborhoods, because we're talking 1967, the peak of literally, the Black Power movement, and all the time the assassination of Dr. King and everything was up in the neighborhood. Like, what's up? It's nation time, yeah. So we were like about building a whole new, on the cusp of building a brand new civilization, and being on the front line and watching this civilization, landing now in the age of Aquarius, where it's about natural health. Otherwise, you got no place, to grow. You're actually regressing, of course, being sick. So, so to say this is to mention now my connection in our neighborhood. Of course, one of the early influence was the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad's book, How to Eat to Live, and eat one meal a day, don't eat this, don't eat that, fasting once a week, all of these things. And then, the independent Black school movement, that was major, where in every major city in the US, there pops up an independent Black school, Al Kabulan in Philadelphia. In New York, where I was, it was, well, the main energy was the East, a cultural center, a cultural vortex in New York for consciousness, for high energy wellness movement. But now we're talking a co-op, Uhuru Sasa Shule. Uhuru Sasa Shule is the name of the independent Black school in Brooklyn, teaching our children now at home, at home, elementary school, in the neighborhood, and tied to Uhuru Sasa Shule, Freedom Now School. We had Uhuru Sasa Co-op, a food co-op, selling now organic foods in the neighborhood, mirrored or patterned or just observed, after the co-ops that were being opened up around the US through the hippie movement, where we're cooperating with each other. We're coming together, buying in bulk, bringing the food to our neighborhood and breaking it down and making it more affordable, more reasonable, rather than our people have to go to the Greenwich Village, to the hippie area to buy the stuff. Now we have it in our community. And my first class, 1967, my first class, formal class on vegetarianism was right there at Uhuru Sasa Ujamaa, Cooperative Economic, the co-op, where it was actually Vegetarianism 101 in the co-op, where I'm learning about vegetarianism. And coincidentally, the person that was teaching there, he was from Panama as well at the time, Wally Mensa. And he's teaching vegetarianism. And I'm like, wow, I got to go hang out with this brother. I got to learn the real formality of vegetarianism, because otherwise we were winging it at the time. And to see all of this, and then at the cultural center tied to the independent black school and the co-op, there's this place called the East, where we had the origin of what is today the remnants of it, the International African Street Festival, which is still done in Fort Greene in Brooklyn. But we had it going on big time back then, and it started right there on 10 Claver Place, where this institution was. But the East was this cultural mecca where it was jazz and other conscious music coming in on the weekends. We talking Pharoah Sanders, and all of the big giants who were doing the jazz and our music, but also these were like vegetarians. These were like real conscious brothers and sisters, Gene Carn and Doug Carn, where even Elijah, Iyanla Van Zant came up in this community. When she first did that first book, this was where it was done, based on the efforts of our community efforts of now raising health consciousness. And then we have our healers, and the biggest one now that was all around, that was, I would say, the queen mother of African American healing consciousness, straight out of Chicago. Chicago was the Mecca for our healing. And it was a sister by the name of Dr. Alvinia Fulton. She had a place on the South Side, the Fultonia Institute. And full circle, she's the one that got a hold of Dick Gregory, the 300-pound comedian, turned him into a fruitarian, put him to fast, and knocked him down to 98 pounds from 300 pounds. This was his mentor. This was his guru. This was the queen mother that got a hold of our great one and definitely detoxed him, and a whole different Dick Gregory from there moving forward. So this is where all of the health consciousness, this is the roots of his health consciousness. Dr. Alvinia Fulton out of Chicago, but on and on. The history is very profound, and I'm just a link, that can, keep that gap bridge between the 60s and today. I've served over 3 generations already, with what I'm doing. And I see great grandchildren now coming up of people who studied with me, 50 years ago.
When did you decide to leave America and return to Panama? Was it because things were changing in the U.S. as far as, and I think about you in the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s, and the late 90s, the neighborhood was very, still kind of strong. And then, but you had heroin, you had crack, you had all these,
Oh, yes.
things pouring into the neighborhood. And, now, is there a neighborhood? Is there a community?
Oh my goodness. When I went to Harlem in 1979, this was after one of my great moves from the US. I had moved from the US in 1978. I was an administrator at the San Bernardino Unified School District in California. And prior to that, I was the administrator at the San Francisco Unified School District, where I was a bilingual curriculum writer because of, growing up with the Spanish, and I majored in Spanish and for my BA, and minored in education. So I was a Spanish teacher for a few years. Then I became an administrator in bilingual education, teaching teachers how to teach English as a second language. So coming up through all of that, and so I retired at the age of 29. After I became a vegetarian, and what people today will call a vegan, when I was 23 in 1970. I stopped eating all animals. I still use the terminology vegetarian rather than vegan because vegan just doesn't vibrate with me. It doesn't address why I became a clean food eater, why I stopped eating animals. It wasn't, veganism is about animal rights. And no, I didn't stop eating, animals because I love animals like that I want to protect and defend them. I stopped eating animals because I wanted to protect and defend this black, afro that I was living in. because I've realized that I am an endangered species as an animal being as well. So I don't have to focus on, not eating animals so they don't get mistreated. I have to focus on the fact that I don't want to get mistreated myself. I don't want to get sick. That's why I'm not eating animals. So animals don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to eat them. They don't want that kind of relationship with me. Most of them try to run away from me or chase me down. So I ain't trying to have that relationship with them either. But I'm doing it for my rights as a human being, human rights, not animal rights. And I want to protect and defend my life. And I know if I eat animals, they're going to make me sick. Payback is deep, So no, I don't want to. So anyway, coming full forward with this now, and then, going through all that I've gone through, and yes, what made me decide? I made like 3 movements to leave the U.S. So this was in '78 when I retired. I'm like, I can't do this no more. It's fine. I love my job, love my students, love my teachers that I'm teaching, but I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. So I retired with no plans of what I was going to do, but I know it just wasn't that anymore. And I moved. I moved to East Africa. I ended up in Tanzania, so there, because I was speaking Swahili. I studied Swahili. I was a Swahili teacher, because languages is my thing. I grew up with that, so it's easy for me to acquire languages very swiftly. So going to Tanzania, I ended up, being at home because I studied actually Swahili at the East, at the Uhuru Sasa Shule, because they were teaching Swahili to the children there, but then also it was being taught to the greater community. So everything is tied in together. So anyway, when I left Tanzania to move back to the US, I decided I'm not going to go back into the school system the way I was before. So I need to chart a more independent path, So I decided to go to Harlem because I knew Harlem. I could figure it out in Harlem better than, going back to California, whereas where I moved from in '78. So really a year later, I'm back in the US and I'm getting to do that restart. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to do it in Harlem because Harlem was on the move. We had big healthy eating consciousness. Sister Daya Kwanda, she had the house of Aquarius, Radiance, where she did yoga and meditation and these things. And we had Brother Kanya McGee. Brother Kanya McGee, he had UCLA, a big bookstore at which he called the University at the corner of Lenox Avenue, UCLA, University at the corner of Lenox Avenue. So he had, Harlem was a no-go zone in that area, in that time, 1979. You do not go up to Harlem. It's like junkie on the corner, everywhere, junkie in the abandoned house, everywhere. Aaron was all over the place. So, but I'm like, no, I got to move to Harlem. I'm not going to just settle for Brooklyn. I want to go all the way where, I can be independent. I could be independent. So going to Harlem, yes, because now I had developed my food thing. It's like 2 years now, I'm all raw. I became all raw in '76, so 6 years after becoming a vegetarian, made that move to all raw in '76. And now today we're talking 49 years of only eating all raw foods, plant foods. So yes, so it's now Sunfired. What is Sunfired? Sunfired, I say Sunfired is a multitudinous scheme of culinary excellence, fusing international vegetarian dishes from around the world to do this eclectic, kush vibe, healthy food for our community. This is it. So Sunfired, the connotation with the word Sunfired is that our food is cooked by the sun. There's only one chef on this planet. That chef is the sun. cooks for everybody. The sun is right here, right now. If we were on video, I would flip the camera and show you my coconut trees.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd show you my coconut trees, show you the bananas, the plantains, the papayas being cooked by the sun. So the growing period is the cooking process. And the chef is the sun. The chef is the universal sun, the universal chef that cooks for everybody on this planet. Whether you're uptown, downtown, in the village, in the hamlet, in the ghetto, Hollywood, wherever you are, God is cooking our food. So the sun is the most godlike, tangible, godlike energy that affects everybody on this planet. And for sure, it cooks our food. So the time it takes, say, a banana tree to blossom, same like you see, like the time that cherry tree blossoms, the fruit is coming. The fruit is coming. But from the time you see the sprouting starting on the trees, from an early stage, it takes an entire year on average for the sun to actually cook every single food. Some things may be done in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but for the greater part, it takes a year for my bananas to be cooked by the sun. It is a slow, meticulous, exact process that when the pot is ready, the birds come home to feast. That's our signal. The pot is ready. Here comes the birds, and don't let them beat you to it. These birds, man, they are something else. They would yam off all the food. Especially
makes me-
the mangoes. There's certain mangoes that are grown some places in the world. Listen, don't mess with those mangoes.
Listen, animals eat good. Animals eat good, and they're smart.
Oh God, they are too smart. But look, interestingly enough, now that brings us to where I am. I am in the Caribbean. I'm on the Caribbean coastline of Panama, and where I was born. This is where I was born. I was born 20 minutes from here. But that's when, back in the days when we used to take a boat and come from my end of the Caribbean to this end. Yeah, we look for good weather when as the sea mirrors the sky, so blue sky and everything, and we could sail on, and it's back then. But anyway, now of course we got to drive and go around here and go around there. But I am sitting in a place close to what I call the land of the big B's. Big B's, letter B. These little beings that their designation in English begins with a B. The birds, the bats, the bees, the butterflies, and the bugs. And those come in the millions. Wherever these big bees or little bees hang out is fruit heaven. Birds, bees, bats, butterflies, bugs. So this is where I was born, in Gatun, the Gatun Lake, a man-made lake, 1904, created by the U.S. to float the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is a canal that's built up in the mountains. So we're talking, here is a canal up in the mountains, high, above sea level, and the ships are going up to mountain height, sailing through for 50 miles from the Pacific or the Atlantic coast to the other to drop on the other side. So it was quite an engineering feat. The U.S. Corps of Army engineer, they did it, They had water elevators. So the ship would come into a chamber, the gates lock, and water would raise. It's like an elevator. If they'll fill the chamber with water and the ship floats up.
Well, y'all, talking about water, We're going to
Yes.
take a quick break. We will be back after a few messages from our advertisers. I hope y'all are enjoying this conversation with Dr. Latham, and we will be back to talk about water and the legacy of Bushmen in the Caribbean.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
All right, y'all, we're back. In the first half of this conversation, this highly vibrational, electrifying conversation, I want to talk about and follow up just on something you said about water. Now, in the internet, you have a huge social imprint on the internet, on social media. You have so many interviews out there. Many people have followed you. You've taught generations, and it's always comes up, the man who doesn't drink water. I would love for you to clarify to our audience,
Well,
what
I
your
did
thoughts
a
are about
show.
water.
There was a series of television show in Jamaica called Yamins. Yamin is for to yam, to eat, to yam. So this is the Jamaican word for yamins, for eatings and stuff like that. Yamins. So my segment was the last of 15 shows, and they saved me for the last for this particular season because here I am. I think I was 72 at the time, and I'm climbing a coconut tree, a tall coconut tree at 72 to go get my coconut because I drink coconut water. I drink living water. My water has to come from a plant source. I have to drink directly from the plant to me. I don't drink water that did not transit or pass through a plant source. So this is where it becomes filtered, activated, ready for my system. My body cannot do nothing with water that comes directly from the earth because, of course, it's been contaminated. So I don't want you putting it through your filtration system with chlorine and all of this. I want it to go through nature's filtration system. The limestones and the trees, the roots of the trees that suck this water up, thanks to the sun. Because, especially the coconut water, the coconut tree, we're talking as it is above, so it is below. So you see a coconut tree 100 feet up into the sky, of course, it's trying to reach the sun. That's why the higher the tree grows, the closer it gets to the sun, But then on the opposite end of that, as it is above, so it is below, the roots of that tree are going 100 feet down into the earth. So we're talking quite a balancing act for that coconut tree not to tilt over and fall down eventually. It is anchored. It is anchored in what we call the Pachamama. So this is where my Spanish culture, my Latin culture comes in. Pachamama means Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So that coconut tree is anchored in the bosom of Mother Earth with its roots going all over the place. This way, that way, and everywhere they can go down into the earth. That's really clamping it down. So that tree is not going to tip over. A wind is not going to come and knock that tree down unless it's a fierce hurricane. We've seen those before. But otherwise, here we are. And of course, coconut trees, they grow abundance by the seaside. So, you know, you got a place right now in Florida that they outside of Miami, they're right south of Miami. It's called Coconut Grove.
Mm-hmm.
Coconut Grove. Well, that's where the people from the Bahamas settled in Coconut Grove. So they know about the energy of the coconut. So when they came from the Bahamas, they did not cut down those coconut trees. So I don't know, there might still be a few of them left today because, you know, these real estate, you know, growing coconuts is not worth it anymore. They could put a high rise there and make, you know, 10 million per square inch, you know, rather than a coconut tree. But anyway, so the land has been raped. So when the conquerors came, all of the coastline of Florida was nothing but coconut trees. Absolute. The whole Florida was a coconut grove. Yeah. And all over the entire world, in the tropics, between the tropic, you know, that tropical area between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, as the closer to the equator you get, abundance of coconut trees, wild coconut trees everywhere. So some folks like, oh, you can't grow enough coconut trees to feed the world of its thirst. Come on, that's a lie. That's a joke. That's a joke. If you let nature be, actually, if the gangsters didn't collar up the food business right now, and you let food just be, nature built in a natural food factory for us. Every single seed bearing tree, and you say it's in your scriptures, behold, for I've given unto you the seed yielding trees, and unto you there shall be your meat. So if there is a law of food, you check your Bible in Genesis and you read that one quote right there. Behold, for I've given to you the seed yielding trees, and unto you they shall be your meat. Your food should come with seeds in them. And those seeds need to go back to the earth. So we're talking, look at a simple, like a apple tree. One apple tree may bear, like, let's give it a small count, 3,000 apples for the year. We know it's a whole lot more than that. 3,000 apples for the year. And each one of those apples may have 12 seeds in it. And every single seed from every single apple is another potential apple tree. Watermelons. One watermelon could have 100 seeds. Every seed from every watermelon is another watermelon vine. So really, realistically, by now, give life a chance, and this planet should be overrun with food, period. There should be no food shortage, no food insecurity, no food, scarcity jungle or nothing like that. And food should be free. You buy one tomato and you still living on the land, you still living down in South Carolina, and you still got your little backyard, front yard, side yard, or whatever. You buy one tomato and you throw those seeds out there, you're going to be getting tomato vines forever, every year, more and more. You keep multiplying that, ridiculously by the amount that is yielded each year. One avocado tree may yield 300 avocados. And every single one of those trees, avocados come with another seed for another tree inside of it. So you're multiplying exponentially times 300 times 3, over and over and over for 50, 60, 70 years. Where is our avocados? Where are our apples? Where are our peaches? Where are our cherries? Who the heck? What did they do? Did the bankers hijack our food basket? Do we get ripped off from our land and placed in urban areas, stacked up where we can't grow foods no more? And we're at the mercy of the supermarket, just enough food to last you in Harlem for 1 week, for another truck to come in with another load? It's a revolution out here. Let's not be late.
I mean, we saw it, during COVID. And unfortunately, even when I sometimes visit the Caribbean, I'm starting to see the change there as well.
Yes.
And, when you mentioned Pachamama, it made me think of the medicine women,
Oh,
in
yes.
Peru,
Oh, yes.
I was in Iquitos and, went
Yeah.
there with my family and
What?
experienced ayahuasca, with a beautiful, elder named Matilda. And so, and then it also makes me think about just how, you know, our colonization has done such a damage to our mind. But yet when we get sick, and when, I have extended family who count on the Bushman,
Oh,
but
yes.
then the Bushman sometimes gets, discriminated against.
Ah,
So much has happened. So what can we learn for those who are from the Caribbean or have family that is from the Caribbean, or those in the States? What can we learn from the power of Bushmen as well as, medicine women?
well, let me tell you, there's so much we can learn. There's everything we can learn about healing. But our biggest challenge is that, again, our food has been weaponized. Our foods are drugs. They are drugs. So you can learn from the Bushman. You can go to the medicine woman and you can get a clean out and you get a detox. But for goodness sake, don't go back and retox. This is our problem. Make it sustainable. And to make it sustainable, you have to remove the cause of the problem. What caused you to be toxic in the first place? So it's fine to seek what's good for it, but it's more important to seek what's bad for it and stop putting in the cause. Wake up, family. So what we're getting from the Bushman, what we're getting from the herbalist, what we're getting from the Dr. Sabis and all his soldiers that he left there with us, and all of our great healers, the hobologist, Dr. Moore, John Moore, who was at the Tree of Life there in Harlem, the university at the corner of Lenox Avenue, who was the herbologist, which he called himself a hobologist, that was teaching us stuff. But the main thing, you need to get off of your plate the cause. Because otherwise, we're using the herbs, we're using the medicine man, we're using the healers as crutches to help us to make room to put more of the problem in. So we need to stop it. We were not designed to be sick. So stop approaching life from a sick mentality and make peace with, I am not going to get sick, period. So the medicine man, the healers, they can do other things in life. Or they can really take care of people who are serious about not going back home to retox. And this is where we come in. You have to get food that's going to bring you life. So it's not the food in your life, but it's the actual life in your food that nourishes. So when you come to Sunfired, we're teaching you how not to cook the sun out of the food. And back to the point of the water. The water point is very critical, very crucial to everything else that I have to say, and that I would that I have said already. Because the human body is 70% water, oxygen. And look at what's on our plate today. Please, look at what's on our plate. 70, 90% fat and starch. Yeah, plastic and cardboard, literally cement. And a lot of the starch, a lot of the fat turns into to wax. And you see, some of you had to have it syringe out of your ears because you ate it fried, you ate it cooked. The body cannot do anything with processed, cooked, heated fat at all. So this is one of our biggest problems, and we need to back up the train, back up the seeking, and let's seek wisdom and prevent, and not, because unfortunately it's very painful to see we birth our children and we start the killing process right away, feeding them off the plate that we're eating on. And then, since they've been so messed up today, little 12, 15-year-old, and they got asthma already. Look at what we're feeding them. All of this gook, all of the starch and protein, water, liquid, 70%. Your body is just like, it's a macro or micro of the macro of the earth. The earth is 70% water, liquid. Your body likewise. So look at what you're eating. So your doctor, with their malpractice education that they bought, they look at it and they say, oh, something's wrong with your plate. For goodness sake, you need to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Thank you, doctor. But the water you're recommended is empty, blank, and it dilutes us. We want water that's going to bring substance, nourishment to our body. We want water that's loaded with minerals, that's fully charged, electrolytes, living energy. We don't want the blank water. We don't want your recycled toilet water that you call purified water. Because that's all you're doing, a lot of you. Processing that purified water, you just turn on the tap sink, and that tap sink water already ran through the mill a few times already, and it's been repurified. A lot of it comes from the toilet as well. What they do, they remove the sludge from the toilet and take that water and send it through a whole nother thing and clean it up and put that anyway, XYZ. But, we got a lot more to share with you. And we want to share the positive. We want to share the moving forward. So it's about my plate. Thanks to Michelle Obama, she brought up and changed the U.S. dietary requirements and got rid of that good old pyramid. And she came up with my plate. So let's start from there. Basic food knowledge, 001. And we got to give her the thanks. We have to give her the credit. She wasn't, from some other side of the track. So mainstream never gave her the credit. A lot of y'all don't know that the food guideline has been changed and it's now about my plate. And on my plate, she says 50% fruits and vegetables. This is the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture food guideline that they are telling you should consume 50% fresh fruits and vegetables. And this is something I've been saying since 1976. When I did a presentation in the U.S. Congress in 1992 during the Bill Clinton administration, where Senator Alcee Hastings, that brother from Florida, and his people in Congress at the time, through efforts of my marketing, genius that was, my partner at the time, that I had a place in Bethesda, Maryland called Green City Market and Cafe. We had a 10,000 square foot natural food supermarket, bigger than any Whole Foods at the time, 1990 to 1994. So during that time, during my residency in the area, I was invited to the U.S. Congress to make a presentation to let the folks in the Clinton administration know that if you promote the eating of Sunfired Foods, and I brought out my chart, and it's interesting because the My Plate chart kind of mirrors my Sunfired feasting, fasting, and healing system, which we're talking since 76, I produced this in Harlem, in 1980. That's when I unveiled it for the first time. The electromagnetic energies of food. The electrical and the magnetic energies of food. The higher the moisture in the food, the more electrical it is. The lower the moisture, the more magnetic. So you're looking at the difference between the 4 major food group, the fruits, which are sugar. They're simple carbohydrates. We're talking grapes and peaches and oranges and strawberries. These are simple carbohydrates. Watermelon, these are direct sugar. Then we're talking the foods that are high in fat, protein. Protein, whether it's animal protein or plant protein, plant-based protein, then fat. Anything that yields fat, that yields oil, olive oil, yes, fat, protein. Coconut oil, fat, protein. Avocado oil, fat, protein. Okay, almond oil, yes. Walnut oil, protein, fat. So protein come with fat. So your fruits come with sugar, your protein come with fat.
So, Dr. Latham, will you share all of that information in your cookbook. I would love for you to talk about that. I know we talked about it
Oh
previously.
yeah, my book. I'm really looking to release this book
Mm,
in the summer.
mm,
Yes, it's Sunfired Soul Food,
mm,
or better yet, Sunfired the Soul of Food. So
mm.
we don't mistaken it, but it's definitely food for the soul. Bottom line.
Y'all, for my listeners, it's so funny to listen to you and the passion. I said, oh, this man has lived in Harlem and that soapbox preacher. I wanted to, I said, oh man, I said, I miss those days.
Yeah, well, when I got to Harlem, Adam Clayton Powell was on the soapbox.
Okay.
I've been listening. Yeah. Malcolm was on the soapbox. Oh, yeah. I've been listening. Oh, yeah. Reverend Ike, you know me. So
Mhm.
I heard it all. And yeah, I'm a product of my environment, of course. Plus, I have a master's in linguistics. So I studied, one of my mentors is one of the greatest African American linguists ever, Dr. Ernie Smith, affectionately known as Sweet Ernie. So he was my master professor at Cal State University in Fullerton, where I got my master's degree in linguistics. And this man taught me the art of orating, of speaking, very top for persuade. So between Dick Gregory and my man, Sweet Ernie, Dr. Ernie Smith, open up the mic
Mm,
for me.
mm, mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
So
anyway,
what is
it's the ancestors, speaking too. I'm just
yes, yes,
voice of
a
the ancestors.
vessel.
I'm known as a griot in our African culture, oral historian. So I got this from grandma.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. I love it. We are all vessels and you are one of our greatest vessels. And I just wanted to, extend our garden and to you because you have created a garden, you have planted seeds, and we appreciate your work and we honor you. And I just, I'm so thankful for you. Muchas gracias por todo.
Bien, bien, bendición. See,
Gracias, gracias, la bendición.
this is the thing. I always try to get it in because for me, yeah, I got the culinary arts. Because all you got to do is lend me your palate for 1 second, and you'll respect what I do. But also, I have the science to back it up. The electromagnetic science of Sunfired Foods. I have an honorary doctorate degree in Sunfired Food science for having observed the science of eating all raw plant foods in this original state. So I can back it up. So bring the arguments. Bring your arguments.
Well, I think you have enough, you have the foundation, and like I said, for our listeners, he is so respected in our community, and worldwide, all over the world, in the Caribbean, Africa, the States. And I just really admire his work, and we have to cherish our elders that are left who are doing this work, because if we don't, and we don't listen and heed the warnings and heed the advice and wisdom, we're doomed to repeat an even darker history, right? And with that, but to leave on a positive note, when you talked about Dr. Ike, I was thinking, oh, let's give some affirmations.
Yeah.
What are you affirming for the future for those who, see through the concrete jungle as you did? How do we return? Is it fasting? Is it, making sure that we don't get caught up in fad diets, keto, and all the other diets that they throw out? But there's also an interest at the same time, or capitalism has a huge interest in indigenous foodways. Because when I saw acai and moringa in Whole Foods, I said, "Oh Lord, they traveling."
Please, 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 please. Oh yes, oh yeah. Well, I tell you, basically, my message: you don't have to be sick. That's the bottom line. That is what I want you to empower within yourself that being sick is not really part of living. So we need to get open to start being adjusted to not being sick. Some of us, like, we've become even hypochondriacs. We manifest sickness, So let's be careful. So, but it's all on the plate. And that's why I brought up the My Plate, your current nutrition guidepost. It has it laid out for you. So that works. So that's a good start. So this is what we have to manifest now, is really looking for what's obviously out there already and join the party. Join the fun of, what I call hungry health seekers around the world that are getting on this tip here and are not becoming sick. There are plenty of testimonies out here, but just using me, observing me as an example, with my age, my energy, my stamina, my vitality, and no mistaking my brain, my wisdom. At 78, my brain should be shrinking, but it's expanding. My crystal ball is getting much more brilliant, and I'm not forgetting, dates and times, even 50, 60, 70 years ago, so you don't have to be sick. You don't have to be wearing crutches, whether you call them glasses or whatever you want to call them, heart makers, pacers, little dialysis and all these kind of things. No, let's get a hold of ourselves, take ownership, and let's reclaim our life. It's in our hands. We are the architect, and we can build a brand new body if we apply ourselves to it, or at least let's stop the decaying process. Let's stop, the degradation of our health. Let's put it under arrest, and let's now start to turn the corner and take it back up to the top. It's our birthright, and we should not be giving it up so easy and condemning ourselves to death row, sitting in a nursing home, even at my age.
Thank you, Dr. Latham. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. And this ends another episode of Culture and Flavor. So we thank you for joining us. We hope you hit that subscribe button and you share our stories and that you share Culture and Flavor. Thank you so much.
I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org.
I know. You're constantly making choices about your food, what you eat, what you avoid, where you get it, and how you factor in all the noise about what's right. But I think you're missing something really critical about how the food on your plate is deeply connected to everything you care about: your health, the community, the environment, and the economy. I'm Dana DePrima, founder of the For Farmers movement and host of the One Bite is Everything podcast, now proudly a part of Heritage Radio Network. Here we are reconnecting the dots, revealing the hidden forces behind our food system and why it matters more than ever. Each week, we uncover the real impact of what's on your plate, who controls it, what's at stake, and what you can do about it. Because food is more than just what you eat. It's quite literally connected to everything you care about. New episodes drop every Thursday. Subscribe to One Bite is Everything and take your seat at the table.